All right, so welcome everyone to the second session of Artist Talks and Ramadan Kareem. I hope you're all doing well, and thank you for joining us today, me and Sarah. And so during this time in Ramadan, the sessions will be at 10 p.m., which is 3 hours later than our original timing. And once the holy month of Ramadan is over, we'll be resuming back to 7 p.m. And for those that are new, I'm Salam Mihiri. I'm an artist based in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. And I really just wanted to do these artist talks to have a platform for artists to share their practices and for creatives or anyone actually to tune in and have these conversations with us. And just a few reminders to keep yourself on mute during the talk. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat. And then I'll be asking the questions to Sarah later on after she has her, I don't think it's a presentation, she's sharing her website today. And yeah, without further ado, today's guest is Sarah Rahbar. I first came across her work in Carbon 12, which is a gallery in Dubai. And her practice stems from personal experience and is largely autobiographical and reflective. And her work employs various mediums ranging from photography, sculpture, and installation. She has exhibited widely in art institutions, including but not limited to Sharjah Art Foundation, the Venice Biennale, I'm gonna butcher this, but the song.
You don't have to read it.
It's okay. Her works are included in the permanent collections of the British Museum, the Davis Museum, and Sharjah Art Foundation, which is amongst others as well. But I'm not gonna say too much about her because she'll be explaining that for herself. So yeah, the floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you so much everyone for joining and coming and listening to me talk. I don't want it to be like a speech or a presentation or showing my website. I just want to give a feel for like why I make the work and what it's about, you know, to the point that we can, because a lot of times we don't even know where this stuff comes from. It just kind of like flows and we try to make sense of it. And sometimes it takes so many years to even understand why you do what you do. Do you want me to share my screen or should I, does that,
yeah,
oh,
that works.
yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know. Cause I don't, do you see it?
Not yet.
No?
Okay, now.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I wasn't sure how that's gonna go. So I don't know if the images are way too small, so I might just click on one of them to get it bigger. Can you see that?
Yeah, clearly.
Okay, good. So I'm just gonna, I don't think I can go through 15 years of work, so I'm just gonna kind of try to make it really short. I just brought the flag series up because it's the first body of work that I started with. And this is the last flag that I did. I'm gonna show you the first flag that I did just to give you a sense of how much it's changed. This is a body of work that I've been working on for about over 15 years. And it's basically the American flag with various objects and things that I've collected from everywhere sewn onto it. And they're all vintage and they're all used. And the last flag, just because of the state that the world is in, the state that America is in, it just became very, very militarized and dark and heavy. But when I first started this series 15 years ago, I want to show you where it started. It was a lot lighter and it was more colorful. And for me, it was just, art is just, for me, whenever I make work, it's a reflection of what's going on around me. And definitely, you know, we all know like what's going on inside of you. So this was like where it started. So you can see the transition. It went from lighter kind of like, even though I feel like this is also very heavy and dark, but then you can just see it's still like, it's a huge shift. It changed a lot and became very militarized. So this was the first body of work that I started. And just to give you a bit of my background, I was born in Iran and I escaped with my family, like a typical situation where you pay smugglers, and they, bring you over to a new country, and it's like, you almost die, and they steal everything, and the typical immigrant story. It took us 7 days on foot, and we went from Iran to Turkey to Dubai to somehow we made it to the US. And I've been living and working in New York for over 40 years. So, I think about it now, and I think of the Flag series, and I think about all of my work. I don't remember the war. I don't remember the revolution. I don't remember much, to be honest with you, like at all. Like I blacked out everything since I was 13 years old. I don't remember much, but we all know like that foundation is laid with it's like, I think it's like 5 years old. Like when you're born till you're 5, there's a basic foundation that's laid. And the first 5 years was war with Iraq, revolution, and complete chaos. And then, we talk about these main things that outside of your house. And then, what was going on in my house was chaos with my family, where, do we have enough money, and how do we get out of here, and losing everything. And then just that journey to America was also very, traumatizing. Just kind of like the smugglers abandoned us at one point, and then they wanted more money. And then my brother was like a baby, and he was in a gym bag. It was very cold. It was like snow up to our knees. It was like all this stuff that happened. And, this stuff, I know it plays a role, but I don't consciously think about it when I'm making the work. But all of this stuff, informs you, because it's the experiences that you've had. And then I came to the US, and the US, I mean, it's been a lot of stuff has happened in the last, lot of stuff has happened. And, I'm like a sponge. I can't just watch the news and not be affected by it. It's, everything comes out visually. Everything for me, I just, that's how I deal with the outside world and not go crazy. And not start killing people and myself, is by making the work. It's kind of like my way of like digesting it all, because I don't know about everyone else, but for me, it's very overwhelming. Being in this world, I'm going to go to the next body of work, and being in your skin, just waking up in the morning is overwhelming for me, and forget about what's going on with animals, with people, and the way we're, behaving and treating each other. So then after the Flag series, I went on to the War series, and I want to give you let's start with this one. This is a gigantic, huge heart made out of empty gas mask bags that I collected for a very long time. From bags from I don't even know, maybe some of them earlier wars, like World War II, and then it changed to the most recent wars, like Afghanistan and Iraq. It just varied. I would literally go to flea markets, and there'd be Vietnam. Yeah, sometimes Vietnam vets, actually, all different kinds of people that were getting rid of their dad's stuff, their uncle's stuff, their stuff. A lot of people that went through these tragic wars didn't want the stuff. It was just traumatizing, and they wanted to get rid of it. So I would just collect and collect and collect, and this became a gigantic heart. And the titles are also very important to me, just to give you a quick background. This one is called You Take My Breath Away. And somehow, with all the tragic stuff with nationalism and flags and war and all this stuff, the titles are very kind of romantic and poetic for me. I don't know how that happens, but it happens very naturally. Sometimes I think of the title first, and then the piece comes. And then sometimes I get the piece and the title doesn't come. And it's very frustrating, because until I have the title, it's not finished. So I have to just kind of sit with it until it comes. And that's why I'm very aware that this work has nothing to do with me, because it doesn't come on demand. It takes its own time. I can't explain. I feel like I'm a medium for it, and I have to just let it kind of flow. And I did a series in War series. War series is basically a series of military objects, tools, stretchers, just things that I've collected. And this one is called Everything Around Me Has Turned to Ash. And I just literally would go to places, and these objects would pop out. And it literally feels like sometimes I'm a medium. When you're younger, you have an ego, and you think it's about you, and you're making this, and you're doing this. And then you get older, and you realize, I have no idea where the stuff comes from. I'm literally like a vessel. I just have to be quiet enough and calm enough so the ideas and the stuff can flow through me. that's what I've reached, like the point, like as I've gotten older and done this work for like 15, 16 years, I realized, and become vegan and become like spiritual and, and like sober and like calm down. I realized like this stuff just comes from nowhere, you know, and I can't explain it. The only thing I can do is take action and put it into the world, because that's what it is for me. Like when I get these images and they don't make sense, look at this piece. Like, what is this piece? This doesn't make any sense to me today, you know? But when the idea came, I had to do it. Like if I didn't do it, I wasn't like sleeping at night. The image would just come over and over again in my mind until I made it. So that's how this work kind of happens for me. And the strangest thing is I'm just showing like one or two pieces from each series, so I don't talk too much and we can move on to like conversation. And then came 206 Bones series. And again, I have no idea where this came from. 206 bones is the amount of bones we have in our body. And this body of work was basically tools and weapons from the like 18th, 19th century, mostly in America, because there was a point where I stopped moving around and I was just collecting things in America, like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, just like within my like area, not going too far, because it just made sense. I mean, I've been living here for so long. It felt like the most authentic thing to do was to work with what's near me. I always felt like I had to travel and go to different places. And I realized, no, it's actually, the work is where you are and you don't need to travel. And I mean, you can, for some people they have to, but for me, I'm realizing the more I sit still and just be where I am and become more comfortable, and the work flows. It's nothing to do with me moving around and, you know, trying to force things and trying to like, oh, if I travel more, if I do this more, I just need to be still. And it comes to me very naturally. And this body of work was kind of like this in-between space. Like the first pieces were kind of flat. It was in this between space of going to sculpture, because it was like the flags were kind of sculpture, the war series was kind of sculptural. And then I wanted to do bronze, but I couldn't get myself there. So this was kind of like, it was exploding. Like I could tell like the flags and the war series was on the wall. All the pieces were on the wall. And this series was helping me kind of like jump off the wall. I wanted to like get rid of the foundation. Like I wanted no foundation. I wanted no tarps, no canvases. I wanted to just come off the wall and just start doing just the sculpture. But you can see, like I went to this piece, like I was still like, I don't know why it was so hard for me to come off the wall. Like I just kept piling the objects on and making it heavier and heavier and heavier. And this actually is one of the pieces in this body of work that I started casting my own body parts. And I still wasn't going to do it like that. It still wasn't sculpture. It was still on sculpture, but on the wall. But it was, I started adding the bronze hands and feet. I started with prosthetics. I'll show you a work with the prosthetics in it. And then it felt, okay, this is great, but it's not human enough. Like you can see there's a prosthetic arm and there's a prosthetic leg in this piece. And I felt like I like that feeling if this feels like a person kind of, but I need to cast my own hands and feet. I need to show that angst that I feel, that stress position. I need to like make it more human. I wanted people to like see a human scale, like a life size, like make it more relatable. So once, like for example, this is one of the last pieces from 206 Bones, and you can see like this for me felt like a full-on person. Let me see. I think is this working? Oh, that's weird. Okay, well, I don't know why that's not working. What I'll do is, oh, I don't know why that's happening. Well, this piece, let me see if I can get an image of it. So this piece was, I felt like I was trying to like make people, but with objects. That's where I was at. And it was like, okay, so why don't I just directly go to the body? And for me, like the most natural thing to do was go to my own body. So I just want to show you this. Okay, here it is. I just started casting my own body parts. And another thing is like at the foundry, it's hard to get someone to come there and sit there for 5, 6, 7 hours and you cast their body. So I also just thought, let me just do my own body. It's easier. It's also, I guess, where is this? It's a control thing. Like when it's your own body, somehow it's a little bit, here it is. This was one of the last pieces of the 206 bones, where this was a leg and then the two arms. And this one was called You Keep Me Warm in a World That Grows Colder. And this literally felt like a person, but like, you know, very aggressive and very cold and very much like an object, with all these pieces that are like tools and all these pieces that are meant to hold things in place and control the movement, which I feel very much. That's what, living in New York, living in America, living anywhere right now, that I feel that sense of, you know, trying to keep people in their place, trying to keep like controlled. Everything we do seems to be being watched these days, and it just, these kind of very dead people in pieces, kind of like these ideas were coming out. But of course, this stuff never comes out until after I make it, and then I think about it, or I'll see it, and it'll just kind of like, that will stand out to me. But it's not conscious. Like this one is called Divided We Fall, and it's the hands again, like lost in these tools. And there's like gun and a few weapons and things. It's always tools and weapons like intertwined together. So Sarah, how long have I been talking? Should I go to the last series or should I shut up?
You're good. Like 10 more minutes max.
No problem. I actually won't even show the red. I'll just show the last. I'll just show the bronze, which was where I'm at now, which basically was where I was trying to get to, I think, from the flags. I always wanted to do bronze. I always wanted to do sculpture, but I think I just had to work up that courage. And I also think, like, this is my arms cast. One's kind of in the closed, like, stretch position, and then the other one's, like, open. And then I always put collected objects. It's like this object that, like, opens up and closes. And below it, I cast World War, I think, II helmets. And I don't know. And this piece is called Salvation. I feel like with this body of work, I've come closer to, here, let me show you this one, to what I really want to say. Like, this is a full body, and it goes against the wall, like almost like it's being attacked, or, you know, like it's this person very vulnerable in their underwear, all this imperfection. When you become close to the bronze, like there's all these lines and cuts and scrapes. I beat up my work a lot, whether it's the textiles or the sculpture. I don't like shiny new things. I like things that are scarred, and that's probably why I work with old things that are used. I never work with new stuff. I like things that have lived and survived. And I think life is like that. Like, I think, you know, where no one's perfect. Life isn't perfect. Things are, you know, you sometimes get dragged through, you know, the mud and like hell and back. And it's like, you know, and everyone's just trying to survive themselves and their families and their locations. And I feel like this work, I want it to be like, you know, rough and like a reflection of what life really is. And life is fucking hard, you know? So I try to, and I like this piece because I feel like when you see it and it's like cut off right above the stomach, it's very confrontational. And for me, at least, it is. It makes me uncomfortable every time I see it. And then this piece, so it's all these body parts in these awkward positions. This piece is called The Victor. And I cut up the legs and I added these collected objects, and it moves. You can put it in so many different positions. And then there's like a head. And it's just interesting, this piece, like, it's like the victor. It's like, it's this like person, like still trying to defend themselves with this mask on, and literally in pieces on the floor. And it just, for me, it's such a reflection of the state that we're all in. Everyone's in like so defensive, and it's hard for people to be vulnerable and to be authentic and to like let their guard down and to like connect. And there's so much, I don't know, it seems like there's a lot of pain, especially these days. And I think the more we hold that in and the more we become defensive, the more that pain grows. If we can, I don't know, like talk about it more. Like I actually, it's one of the things I feel like with my work, I want to confront and talk about that pain and discomfort, because maybe it'll help somebody else, instead of, you know, everyone feeling like they have to hide like their flaws. They have to hide if they have depression, if they have anxiety, if they have addiction. It's, you know, shame that just comes from, you know, that place of feeling like you have to hide your imperfections. And with, I like to show the imperfections. I like to talk about it. I like to put it out, you know? So I think I talked longer than I should have, but so I'm going to end with this piece, and it's called Separation.
Sarah, can you, when we spoke a few days before, we were talking about what would we like to title the session, and you were talking about grasping life and art. So could you talk a little bit about, you know, the separation or the togetherness between life and art? I think you touched on it a little bit, but could you just speak a little bit more about that?
First of all, should I leave the screen or should I end this? I don't know how you guys are seeing it. Just the word, just leave it?
Up to you.
Okay. Because I have little boxes, so I don't know how you guys are seeing it. For me, it's like, I myself have been dealing with, like, you know, depression and anxiety and addiction and like PTSD and so many things like my whole life. So for me, like, just that's where that title came from, like this idea of like grasping and like trying to hold on. That's how I've been my whole life, just like literally just trying to like grasp onto something and like hold on to it so I won't fall off the edge. And I feel like that's what this work does for me. And I think that's why, despite all of the challenges, I've like held on to it and I've continued to work all these years, because it's literally like my sanity. Like that's what's helping me to hold on to life and not give up and kind of just slide off the edges and disappear. Because for me, like, especially now that I'm sober and like I'm just feeling everything's like, you know, I feel like sometimes like my skin is raw. Like I feel everything is like too much for me, if anything. Like it's just overwhelming. And when I make the work, it takes the edge off, if that makes any sense. And I feel like that idea of grasping is because that's where I'm at. I'm literally just trying to, like, a lot of my hands, actually, I'm looking at the page myself, a lot of my hands are holding on to each other or holding on to another and just like holding on for dear life. And I guess that's how I feel all the time. It's for me, it's you know, it's a struggle to be in this world. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing not just your artwork, but also your thoughts and yeah, all of that. And I just wanted to say I was only familiar to your bronze casted sculptures. So to see that from the beginning and how that's evolved is really interesting. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a few questions from people that are joining us today. And the first question we have is, someone's asking, Fatma Al-Meiti is asking, were there any artists you looked up to or were inspired by growing up?
Well, when I first started, I was so young. And because I couldn't afford to go to art school, I had to like just go for 1 year, and then it was so expensive, I had to leave. So I really didn't know much when I first started. I didn't know much about art history and artists, and I didn't really understand contemporary art. It was only later on, I think, I don't know at what point, maybe by War Series, I'm not sure, that I started like really understanding like art history and like picking up on you know, different artists and things like that. And I think there's so many. This is such a tough question, because it's like, you know, from like Francis Bacon to like Goya to Lucien Freud to like, you know, the artists like that are tiered, like Kiki Smith or Louis Bourgeois. There's such, or like to younger artists than me, and there's such a range. And for me, like, I have no favorites. Like I love And, you know, it's like music, like, you know, like you always like one song from, it's not like you love the whole album, but like, you know what I mean? Like you go, for me, at least I'm like that. My music is even like, I'll like country music and then I'll like Pink Floyd and then I'll like, you know, it's so it's like endless. And there's always something that I like from someone. So it's such a tough thing to really touch on.
Isabella is asking, sorry, can't get her in. When you say you feel like you are a medium between the work and something else, do you have any more thoughts on what the something else might be or where it comes from? A cultural memory? Do you feel any pressure bringing this thing out of the other and into a realm where it gets interpreted by an audience?
The audience. Let me. It was a heavy question, so I'll answer the last part of it. The audience part, I feel like once you make the work and you put it out into the world, what people think of it and how they respond to it's none of my business. It's not mine anymore. Like, it's out there, and I want people to add their own stuff and take their own meaning. I think for me, like, good work is like layers upon layers upon layers, and I'm not here to brainwash anyone. I'm not here to, like, you know, impose. If, of course, we have an artist talk and people ask, I'm like, this is what it was for me at the moment when I made it. But then it's out in the world, and you want people, like, think about all the artworks that we see in museums and stuff. We don't always know what the artist, you know, intended. We take it on and make it our own, and that's why it's so amazing, because you can walk through this museum, and for me, I go through like such a range of emotions because each one means something different, you know, for me. So that part of it, the audience part, you know, it's like, it's beyond me. I'm not trying to control anything. I can't, and it's none of my business. The first part, it took a lot. I think it's like age, like I'm 44, and it took a long time to, like I said, like I had to put a lot of stuff away, like not eating meat, you know, not drinking, really becoming centered and clear and clean, and really starting to understand like the bigger picture, really starting to understand like there's energy. It's energy. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in organized religion. I don't believe in nationality. I think it's ridiculous that we have to pay to live on this planet. We're the only species that do that. I think we're all related, you know. I'm the same as my dogs, as a worm. Like, we're all in this thing together, and it's all this, you know, it's energy. It's this big floating ball, and we're all sticking to it and somehow surviving. And that's insane to me. And I don't know how that's happening. And I don't want to make up anything to make myself feel secure and safe. I'll know when I'll know. And there's a lot of things that I can't explain, like where the work comes from. It's this bigger, it's energy. It's energy. I feel like I'm a vessel because I can't understand. I can't make sense of these ideas. It's just flickers of images. It's come to my mind. And if I don't take action, it doesn't let me sleep. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I've been doing this since I was a kid. I wouldn't have chosen this on my own. I'm going to be honest with you, Sarah. It's been really tough. Like, it's a gift. I'm so grateful. I'm not trying to, but it's very tough in this world, in this art world. Like, being an artist, like, unless you know, have success from the beginning or you have some kind of financial backing, it's a tough world to, like, survive. I wouldn't have chosen this. It just, there was nothing else I could do.
But, you know, in a sense, it's also working and sharing this, you know, adds to that and brings these conversations to the forefront. So thank you for that. There's also a question asking from Mariam, do you think the title completes the work? And I'm going to add a little bit to that. You said that you collected a lot of your objects for your artwork. I'm wondering, how do you collect text as well? Or is that part of the process?
I used to write poetry, and I used to write a lot, and the beginning, it came from that, and then later on it just took on a life of its own. And if I'm reading something, if I'm listening to a song, if, like, it just flies, it just comes from everywhere. And for me, it completes the piece. I can't do untitled. I can't do no. I can't explain it. It's just something that it's like the last touch that just kind of like makes sense of the piece for me too. The title always tells me so much. And it just comes.
We have another question from Jill Maggie. She says, can you speak about the relationship between tools and guns? Does wood tie it together or something else? And she finds the wood to be so beautiful. How do you reconcile beauty with painful signifiers and objects that signify violence?
Well, first of all, the wood thing, I love strong objects. I like things that don't break easily. Like, I think that's why I slowly moved away from textiles, because I felt like even with textiles, it was very tough materials. It wasn't like, lace and silk. It was like very tough stuff. And, but I still needed it to be stronger. And for me, like wood and bronze was like the ultimate, it felt very solid. I wanted to work with like solid stuff. And I don't know, something about tools and weapons, they connect something for me. They connect the dots for me. And when they come together, especially with arms and legs, it just tells that bigger story for me of what our life has become about. It makes sense for me. It just really, it kind of like, yeah, it just makes sense. Was there a third question between that? I feel like there was a third.
I think it was the relationship between tools and guns, and how do you reconcile beauty and painful signifiers?
Oh, right. Well, for me, the work comes from a painful place. Not always, but a lot of times. Like, I'm dealing with different things from the past that I'm not always aware of. They just, they're triggered. They come. Like, things in the present sometimes just trigger things from the past, and I'm not always really clear, but there's this discomfort, there's, PTSD. It just comes. And so it comes from this place of being in pain, being uncomfortable, having angst, having anxiety. And then for me, at least, I think it turns into something beautiful that hopefully touches and moves and inspires people and adds something to their life or helps them with something. You know how art is. You can't put it into words. It just does something for you. It's like, it's magic. It's like poetry or like music. You can't explain it. It just makes you feel good. And without it, life would be even harsher. I feel like art takes the edge off like life. So I feel like I'm taking something painful, because a lot of it is also about violence, and making something, beautiful out of it, which that to me somehow is okay. It makes it okay.
Thank you. We have a few more. Someone, AZ, okay, it's a nickname. Thanks for sharing such personal aspects of your life. It's particularly empowering to hear such vulnerability going into your beautiful work. Has your journey with mental health and mindfulness affected your initial view and interpretation of your own art from when you initially created it now? And does it change as you continue to grow? And if so, how? These are really long questions, so you can always just open
That's okay. Yeah, I feel like if I miss anything, let me know. First of all, I don't know how much I can say on Zoom. Like, I don't know what I can say here, but yes, definitely. When I was younger, I battled really bad addiction, alcoholism, a lot of things, really just hard, addiction, because I was in a lot of pain. I listened to this amazing doctor called Gabor Mate, and he always says, it's not why the addiction, it's why the pain. That stuff, everything comes from pain. So we have to deal with that kind of like that source instead of dealing with the kind of like side effects, which are our addictions. I always felt like I need something to like take me away. I need something to take the edge off. Like, I use that a lot. I've said that like 50 times, because it literally feels like my skin is so raw. And in the past, I think I always made the work was always there, but it was more like I wasn't connected to its source. You know what I mean? I wasn't aware of the energy. I was just like on automatic. I was just like going through the motions. But as I became sober and as I became more centered and more calm, and I was able to sit with the pain and just be with everything, like with the sculpture, it's a lot more, I'm a lot more awake to it. And I feel like when I look at the sculpture and I look at the flag series, like where I started, I feel like this is much more authentic. Not that that was bad and this is good. It's just, I just feel like I'm able to shed so many layers, you know, and I want that now. Before I was like terrified of that. It was so much shame and so much, you want to hide that stuff. You don't want people to know you're, you know, uncomfortable in your skin, you're insecure, you know, you have anxiety, you have like depression. It was always stuff. I mean, when I was growing up, it was stuff that you hide, you know, and then I learned you're only as sick as your secrets, and I have to share. And why am I even doing this? In order to be able to, like, I remember the first Louis Bourgeois interview that I saw, I was like, oh my God, like it explains so much stuff with my father and my issues with him. And I was so grateful that she could be so honest. And I wish, you know, I wished all the artist interviews were that honest and that raw, because at least I want my work to be about life, about real stuff, and not like intellectualized, kind of like abstract and decorative. I wanted to really reflect on life, and I want to have interviews and have work that help people to not feel alone, and help people kind of be okay with where they're at. You know what I mean? And I feel like art also, and music, all this stuff, it helps us like deal with that.
No, for sure. I feel like honesty also is something that is really important, and not only like the sharing of your practice, just to your feelings and your thoughts and your ideas, and to be able to share them with others, allows others to also act in the same way and bring us together in a sense, if that's not too much of a cliche.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, I think art does bring us together if we let it.
Yeah, and we'll take maybe two more questions. We might end a little bit early, but Alim Al Hussein asked, thank you, not asked, he says, thank you for your honesty and heartfelt talk. Once the work is out there and people are open to reading it and taking what they can from their read, do you feel any responsibility for the objects you created, such as who buys them, where they're stored, do they trigger survivors, etc.? Is this something that you think about in your practice?
It's very tough, because once, like, you know, you work for so many years and you work with different people, it's so tough to control where the work goes and, you know, what happens to it. In the beginning, I tried to control everything, and I realized it's out of my control. I have no idea where half of the work is now, and, you know, how people treat it, and, you know, they put it in auctions, and so many things happen. And I had to kind of detach, because it's upsetting sometimes. You don't want certain things to happen to the work. It's like your children. You miss them. You're upset. Why are they being shown like this? Why are they being sold? And why? But you can't control it. And like once like I said, you put it out into the world, it kind of takes on a life of its own. You have to let go. What was the second part?
Is this something you think about in your practice? Or do you feel any responsibility for the objects?
Oh, right. No, I can't. The responsibility I feel is trying to, I don't know if it's responsibility. That's a weird word. I feel like I have to make the work, and, you know, maybe, I don't know where the sense comes from with wanting to share it and show it. I don't know. I haven't figured that part out yet. It's not responsibility. I just, I don't know what it is. I still have to figure out why do we can make the work and just kind of store it in our house, but I just feel like I have to give it away. Maybe that's what it is. I have to give it away. It's like a very organic thing. I have to make it, and then I have to give it away. So I feel like, you know, I don't feel any responsibility, because I feel like once it's out there, it's going to do what it's going to do. And my whole focus is on getting it clearly out of my head, and creating it the best way that I possibly can.
Thank you. Maitha Hamdan is asking, she's saying, I always say that, I'm loving the fact that your work includes so many mediums. Have you ever found a difficulty with a specific medium, and how did you overcome it? And she's asking this because she finds herself giving up really fast when she faces a difficulty towards dealing with a new medium.
I totally understand, because I wasn't able to really go to art school, and I wasn't able to like learn all those like specific skills. Everything was self-taught, and I started with actually painting, and then went to photography, and then now I'm doing collage and bronze. So I went literally except for film, I kept changing, and it's every time it was terrifying, especially the bronze. Like I literally had no idea what I was doing, and it's so permanent. You literally, if you make a mistake, you have to melt it down. Like there's no other way. Like the textiles, you can kind of like, you can rip it up and you can dye it, you can do stuff. The photography you can rip up, but bronze is so permanent and it's so expensive and time consuming. So it was terrifying, but my advice about that is you just have to, if you're, for me, the ideas are so strong, like when they come and I have to make it, that like they drag me to the foundry, like learn this now, like I have to do it. And it was terrifying the first time I went there, and I didn't know anything, but you just, this is what I learned in my my 12-step program when I was sobering up. It was like one day at a time, and it's so simple, but that's how I do it now. Like I'm so overwhelmed. How do I do this? This is a new medium. I could mess this up. It could be garbage. And then you show it and people have all different kinds of reactions. But I can't go that far. I take it 1 minute at a time sometimes, one day at a time. Let me just make this one piece. And then I'll decide if I want to do it again or not. But if the feeling is there, my advice is always go with your gut feeling and don't be afraid of the results and don't worry about the results. Just, if you can do it, just move forward, because it's one thing to think about things. It's another to take action and actually make the stuff and put it in the world.
Yeah, that is so true. This is going to be our last question. Moza asks, she's curious about how you source material for your work, especially the military focused ones. I know you spoke about flea markets, but do you have a story about how you found like a particular piece that you'd like to share?
I think literally like it's since I run now, I've been running for 7 years, because that's another thing. Like I chose to not go on medication for the stuff that I'm dealing with, and I exercise and I try to eat well to deal with that, deal with balancing myself. And I literally find objects while I'm running. Like that's how, like I literally attract objects. I've been finding objects since I was little. Like I remember when I was a kid, like just finding garbage and bringing it home and sticking it together. Like this has been a part of my life. And I honestly, when someone asked me this, and I'm still not sure, but I think it's because when we came here, we moved so much as well. But when we first came here, like to America, to New York, we lost everything. I had to leave everything. And then on the trip here, we lost everything. So I have this obsession with collecting things because I lost everything. I feel like that makes sense, but that's one of my explanations. And so for me, the objects come from everywhere, because I'm always looking for it. And either when I'm not, it falls into my lap. So like from flea markets to, I'm going to the supermarket, or I'm running, or, even sometimes I have specific things in mind. Like I'm looking for old guns, old hammers or something. Like I'll look online too, but it's very tough for me to do the online thing, because I need to see it. I need to touch it. I need to feel it. I don't know, it's energy. I need to see the texture. I can't, that's when I know, I have to touch it. So, it comes into my life somehow, but I'm always looking.
Actually, we have one more question that was just sent,
no problem.
But then we'll end it there. Simran, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but she asked, or he asked, there are some paradoxes in your work between the materials you use and the forms you make. Can you explain further about that?
Between the materials I use and the forms that I make?
Yeah.
That's what the question was?
In the work, yeah, between the materials you use and the forms you make. Yes, correct.
I'm not sure how to answer that. What, I didn't even know if there were paradoxes between the forms that I, all I can say about that is it doesn't always make sense to me immediately. Like there are pieces, like the Confession series, I remember just having this feeling of, I want to cast my hands, like in this position. I didn't even think, okay, should I do the whole arm? Should I, do my legs? Am I going to attach it together? It was just, I want to cast my hands in the stretch position. how do I do that? So I found the foundry and I went and did it. After like 10 years of casting different body parts and sticking them together, I look at like the series and I'm like, oh, these are people in pieces. Like I've never done a full body. It's all like people in very uncomfortable positions in pieces. It almost looks like I feel like my work looks like the aftermath of a war. You know what I mean? Like what remains. But, you know, now I'm looking at that like years later. I don't always know or always even consider or think about, is this making sense? Is this a paradox? Is this like, it'll take on different definitions and different layers and people have different interpretations for it. And I've gotten good and bad, a lot of angry people with the flags and the war stuff. And then a lot of positive responses because they're all putting on their own filters and their own layers. For me, none of it comes from hate. None of it comes from anger. None of it comes from, you know, being against any one thing or any one person or race or nationality. It's just me going through life, seeing stuff and working it out through this work. You know what I'm saying? So I don't necessarily think like, oh, I'm going to try to be clever here and I'm going to try to like make a contradiction here and I'm going to, no, it just, I'm a very emotional artist and everything comes from my gut.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who joined. And I just want to say a special thank you to Sarah who agreed to do this and just to be so truthful and raw and talk about things that maybe isn't always said. And hopefully everyone got a bit out of it. So yeah, thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much for coming. I thought no one was going to come. Thank you for coming. I thought it was going to be me and Sarah by ourselves.
That would be fine too.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come. I really appreciate it. It meant a lot to me. It's very helpful for me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Oh God.
Bye. Bye.